Hey, welcome to Comics Characters Chronology, where we follow along different comic book characters' appearances chronologically throughout the comics and other media. And this is our first episode of Spider-Man. So we're going to get started right away here in Amazing Fantasy number 15. And the first thing we always like to do is talk real quick about the cover. So one thing that stands out to me about the cover here, especially since just the last episode for those happening to follow along this in real time, is we just talked about Detective Comics number 27, and it's hard not to see some similarities here in Amazing Spider-Man 15. We have this same idea of someone swinging out over the street while holding on to a villain out over the abyss. But unlike Batman, which had sort of a dark look to it, obviously, with Detective Comics, with Spider-Man here, the colors really burst off the cover here a lot more. You have this, bright red character, obviously with some blue accents in there. This ornate design on a costume here with even the web underneath the armpits. I've never really quite understood that design element myself. It seems like it might not be practical when fighting, but I guess a lot of superhero costumes aren't really all that practical. But anyways, it's a striking cover. Certainly would get my attention if I were, 10 years old, 12 years old in the comic store. I guess not even the comic store at that time, the newsstand, and I happened to see this on there. It certainly would jump out and grab your attention. So before we get into the actual story itself, real quick, I just want to review who's credited on this issue, who put this thing together. That's something I think is always worth seeing each time. Okay, so on the cover is pencils, not someone we typically associate with the character of Spider-Man, but it's actually Jack Kirby. Usually we think Ditko, and for good reason. I mean, Spider-Man is a Ditko character, but apparently Kirby did do the pencils for this first cover, with Ditko doing the inks. To me, it still looks very much like a Ditko image. I think, if anything, Jack Kirby must have done something a little more rough, with Ditko really putting the finishing touches. The colors on the cover by Stan Goldberg, and the letters is Artie Simek. We have inside for the story Stan Lee, of course, doing the script, doing the words, Steve Ditko doing the pencils. At this time, Marvel pencilers are co-plotters, co-story writers. Inks also by Steve Ditko, colors Stan Goldberg again, and Artie Simek on the letters. All right, real quick story summary. We're not going to go beat by beat through the whole thing, but just a quick overview. Peter Parker, a high school student, is actually bit by a radioactive spider. This gives him some new abilities, and his first instinct is to attempt to profit off that through things like performances, TV shows, those kinds of things. Now, at one point, Spider-Man allows a thief to just pass him by. He doesn't make the slightest effort to put any stop, even though really he wouldn't even have needed his superpowers. He could have just tripped the guy passing by. Now, this seems to be an inconsequential event at first, until Peter Parker learns that his Uncle Ben has been killed. Now, Spider-Man, Peter Parker in the guise of Spider-Man, decides he's going to hunt down this crook who did this, and discovers that it was in fact the same thief that he allowed to escape previously. And our issue ends with Spider-Man handing the crook over to the police, and then he is left to deal with the consequences of his inaction, I suppose, at the end of the story. Okay, just some story notes real quick, some thoughts I had when looking at this issue. I would make a case, actually, that I think this is probably the third most recognizable superhero origin, coming in just after Batman and Superman. And who knows, maybe, amongst certain age groups, it may even be more recognizable. I think probably not more recognizable than Batman's, but there are periods where it may have been even more recognizable than Superman's. Now, the story itself is a little bit slow moving, honestly. There's really not much action until that very end, when Spider-Man's hunting down Uncle Ben's killers or killer. And frankly, even the point at which Peter Parker discovers his powers, it's a little bit slow moving. It doesn't have kind of the wonder to it that I think we see in later retellings of this origin. That being said, though, there's only so many pages, so it's sort of understandable that's not going to be ideal. But the story does definitely leave you wanting more. And from what I've heard about the origin of Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy was set to be canceled, and this was a character that they didn't have high expectations for, and so they figured, we'll throw it in there, and if there's any kind of a buzz, maybe we'll do more with the character. And it seems that there was, as I think we can make a case that he's Marvel's most recognizable character at this point. All right, and since this is about the character specifically, just some quick notes on the character of Peter Parker / Spider-Man within this issue. There's some definite hints at some things that we will see a lot more of over time with the character. We get just a sense of his social outcast place among his peer group, and then we do get to see too a little bit of the closeness of his relationship with Uncle Ben and Aunt May as well. I just want to point out, I found it a little bit comical at the range of, let's say, talents that Peter Parker has. I'm not even talking about his abilities as Spider-Man yet. He gets this spider power and manages to develop his own web serum, which is pretty crazy. Yet on top of that, he's an incredible fashion designer as well, because that's quite the costume that he manages to put together. So yeah, Peter Parker, a man of many talents for sure. All right, and one final point to hit on here, and again, I think I'm probably thinking of this because I just did Batman in the previous episode of this channel, for those who, like I said, are following along live. To me, it seems sometimes underplayed just how psychologically crippling the events surrounding Uncle Ben's death here would be. I mean, I know Parker has his struggles with it and whatnot, but if you think how regularly we have the Batman, we've got to watch those pearls fall again, for the 100 millionth time, when Batman really couldn't have done anything, obviously, in that situation, the young Bruce Wayne. But Uncle Ben is dead very specifically because of Spider-Man's inaction. That I really think that would do something to your head, and maybe that's underneath Parker's playful banter, is a hurting heart or something. But I haven't read all of Spider-Man yet, honestly, but I've read a fair bit, and I haven't seen that played with, and certainly it's not played with as regularly as the pain and hurt that Bruce Wayne suffers in Batman's origin story. All right, well, that's it for this one. Pretty quick. Like I said, eventually I'd like to be able to fit 3 appearances in one episode here. Again, depends on how quickly I can do this. But next time, we're going to jump back over to DC, and we're going to be doing the first appearance of the Justice League in Brave and the Bold number 28. So look forward to that next time. Thanks.